time when the new nation was still finding its shape, when borders drawn by strangers carved through the heartlands of ancient peoples, there lived in the eastern region a village called Nkwo. It was a place where the red earth yielded generous yams, where palm trees stood like sentinels, and where every compound gate bore the itchy marks of free men, the proud scarification that said, "We are Igbo, we belong to ourselves." The village was ruled by a council of elders, but the soul of Nkwo lived in its young people. Among them were 3 friends, bound together since childhood like fingers on a hand. Adana, whose name meant father's daughter, though she had the courage of 10 sons. She could debate the elders and win, could plant faster than the boys, and kept hidden beneath her wrapper a book of poems she wrote by candlelight. Obi, the blacksmith's son, whose hands could shape iron into farming tools or weapons with equal skill. He dreamed of building bridges and schools, of an Igbo land that stood tall among the nations of the world. Chinoso, the quiet one, who kept the old ways. He knew every proverb, every story, every ritual. The elders said he had an old soul, that he carried the ancestors' wisdom in his eyes. The 3 were inseparable until the day the radio brought news that changed everything. It was January in the year 1966 when the first tremors shook the earth. News came of killings in the north, Igbo people murdered in markets, in their homes, on the roads. Then came the soldiers' coup and counter-coup and more killings until the blood flowed like the great rivers. The refugees began arriving in Nkwo, carrying children on their backs, terror in their eyes, and stories that made even the bravest warriors weep. One evening, as smoke rose from cooking fires across the village, the council of elders called an urgent meeting under the ancient Ukwa tree. The entire village gathered, men, women, children, even the nursing mothers. Elder Nwokolo stood, his white wrapper bright in the fading light. Our people are being slaughtered like goats in the northern regions. The Federation has failed us. Our governor speaks of separation, of creating our own nation, Biafra, he calls it, a homeland where Igbo people can live without fear. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some voices rose in agreement, others whispered doubt. But what is the cost of separation? Asked Mama Nguzi, the oldest woman in Nkwo. War has a price that cannot be counted in cowries or pounds. It is counted in the bones of young men, in the tears of mothers, in the empty spaces at the dinner mat. Obi jumped to his feet, his young voice cutting through the uncertainty. What choice do we have, Mama? To stay and be killed, to pretend we are not Igbo. They want to erase us from the earth. Better to fight and die as free people than to live on our knees. Free, Chinoso spoke quietly, but everyone turned to listen. What is freedom without wisdom? Our ancestors teach us, Onukuru, Onuakudebeya. One mouth speaks, another sets it right. Have we spoken to our neighbors? Have we sought other paths? Other paths? Adana's voice shook with rage. I have seen the photographs Chino saw. Bodies in the streets, children with machete wounds. What other path is there when people want you dead simply for existing? The debate raged until darkness fell completely, until the arguments became circles within circles, until finally Elder Nwokolo raised his staff for silence. Each compound must decide for itself. But know this, if war comes, it will test everything we believe about ourselves. It will ask questions for which we have no answers. It will take our children and give back ghosts. Prepare your hearts, for the storm is coming. 3 weeks later, on the 30th of May 1967, the radio crackled with the voice of Colonel Odumegu Ojukwu declaring the Republic of Biafra. The eastern region had cut itself free from Nigeria like a child fleeing a burning house. In Nkwo, some danced in the streets, others wept, most stood silent, wondering what they had become. Adana found Obi at his father's forge that night, hammering iron with fierce determination. "What are you making?" she asked. "Weapons," he said simply. "If we are to be a nation, we must defend ourselves, and joining the Biafran army tomorrow." Adana's heart clenched, then Anne coming too. "You, a girl?" Her eyes flashed. "Is this not my fight? Did they not kill Igbo women in the north? Do bullets distinguish between men and women when they fly?" She stepped closer. "I can shoot. I can carry supplies. I can fight. Or did we declare independence only for the men to be free?" Obi stopped hammering and met her gaze. Slowly, he nodded. "We'll go together then." But Chinonso, when they told him, he shook his head. "I cannot." "Cannot?" Obi's voice rose with disbelief. "Your own people are dying and you cannot fight." "I did not say I would not serve. I said I cannot pick up the gun." Chinonso touched his chest, where his offer stick, the sacred symbol of justice, hung on a cord. "My path is different. Someone must remember who we were before the war, so we know who to become after the war. Someone must keep the stories alive." "Stories?" Adana spat the word. "What good are stories against bullets?" Chinonso's eyes were sad but steady. "What good is winning a war if we lose our souls in the fighting? What good is Biafra if all the Igbo values die in the bush? You go and fight with your hands, Adana. I will fight with my memory. We'll see who serves better." They parted in anger that night, the three friends divided like the nation itself, each certain of their path, none knowing where those paths would lead. The Biafran army was a miracle of determination and desperation. Teachers became soldiers, traders became commanders, university students assembled weapons from scraps and dreams. They called themselves the People's Army. And for a time, the world watched in amazement as this small republic pushed back the Nigerian forces. Adana and Obi trained together in a camp outside Enugu. They learned to shoot with rifles that jammed, to march in boots that fell apart, to fight with the fury of people defending their last piece of earth. Adana cut her hair short, bound her breasts flat, and took a boy's name in her unit, Adeze. Most commanders wouldn't accept women soldiers, so she hid in plain sight. Only Obi knew the truth. Their first battle came in August near the northern border. The Nigerian forces advanced with superior weapons, with planes and artillery. The Biafran soldiers fought with rifles, machetes, and pure will. Adana killed her first man that day. He was a young soldier, probably no older than her brother, wearing the green uniform of the Nigerian army. She saw his face for only a moment before she pulled the trigger. Surprise, fear, something almost like recognition. Then he fell, and she vomited in the bush afterwards, her whole body shaking. Obi found her there. "It doesn't get easier," he said quietly, "but it becomes necessary. Remember why we fight." "I'm trying," she whispered, but Chinonso's words keep echoing. "What good is winning if we lose our souls?" "We haven't lost anything yet," but his voice lacked conviction. While Adana and Obi fought in the bush, Chinonso fought his own battle in Nkwo. As the war intensified, as the Nigerian forces began their advance into Biafran territory, the village transformed into a refugee center. Thousands poured in from captured towns, Port Harcourt, Calabar, Onitsha, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs and stories of horror. Chinonso met them all. He gave them water. He found them shelter, and he listened to their stories, writing each one in notebooks he kept hidden in a secret place. "Why do you write these things?" asked a widow who had lost her husband and 3 sons. "What good will words do when we are all dead?" "Because," Chinonso replied, "if we all die and no one remembers what happened, why it happened, how it happened, then we die twice. First in body, then in memory. I refuse to let our people die twice." He recorded everything: the names of the dead, the villages destroyed, the acts of heroism and moments of cowardice, the laughter of children playing war games in the refugee camps, the songs women sang while grinding cassava into gari, the jokes soldiers told before going to the front. An old priest, Father Okeke, who had fled from Onitsha, watched Chinonso write one evening. "You know what you are doing,
Don't you? You're building a shrine, not of stone or wood, but of words. A shrine to resilience." "Resilience?" Chinonso looked up. "We're losing, Father. The blockade is choking us. Food runs low, medicine is gone, children are starving. Where is the resilience in that?" Father Okeke smiled sadly. "Resilience isn't winning, my son. Resilience is the mother who shares her last handful of gari with her neighbor's child. It's the teacher still teaching students under a tree, even as bombs fall. It's you sitting here with your notebook, refusing to let our story die. The Igbo don't measure resilience in victory. We measure it in continuation. Kachifo. As day breaks, we rise again." By 1968, the war had shifted. The early Biafran victories turned to desperate defense. The Nigerian forces tightened their blockade, cutting off food, medicine, weapons. Starvation began its slow, terrible work. In the trenches outside Owerri, Adana and Obi fought alongside soldiers who had once been lawyers, doctors, artists. They fought hungry, fought exhausted, fought knowing that even if they won this battle, they were losing the war. One night, during a lull in the fighting, Obi turned to Adana. "Do you regret it, coming here?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the world is built in such a way that we had to choose between death and war. But coming here, fighting?" She shook her head. "No. At least I faced my fate standing up." "Even if we lose?" "Especially if we lose, because then our children will know we did not go quietly. We did not accept extinction. We fought, we mattered, we existed." A shell exploded in the distance, lighting up the night sky. In that brief flash, Obi saw tears on Adana's face, though her jaw remained set, her rifle ready. "Chinonso was right about one thing," Obi said. "We're losing parts of ourselves out here. I can barely remember the boy who dreamed of building bridges. All I know now is how to destroy." "Then we must survive," Adana said fiercely. "We must survive so we can remember who we were, so we can become who we were meant to be. That's the fight for identity, Obi. Not just fighting for the right to call ourselves Biafran or Igbo, but fighting to remain human while we do it." Back in Nkwo, Chinonso watched the war creep closer. The Nigerian forces were advancing through the heartland. Refugees stopped coming because there was nowhere left to flee from, nowhere left to flee to. The village faced a terrible choice: stay and face the advancing army or flee deeper into the shrinking Biafran territory. At the final village meeting, Elder Nwokolo, now bent with age and sorrow, addressed the people. "We have endured for 2 years. We have buried our children, eaten our seed yams, sold our last goats. Now the enemy comes to our gate. What shall we do?" Chinonso stood. "We stay." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Stay?" someone shouted. "So they can kill us?" "They will kill us whether we run or stay," Chinonso replied calmly. "But if we stay in our home. We stay on our land. We stay with our ancestors. And when the soldiers come, they will find Igbo people who did not abandon their birthright. They will find us rooted like the Iroko tree. And if they burn us like firewood, Then let our ashes fertilize the ground for those who come after. But I will not die running. I will die Igbo, in Igboland, on my father's land." Not everyone stayed. Some fled that night, carrying whatever they could. But many remained, including all the elders, the very old, the sick, and the young children whose parents had already been taken by war or disease. Chinonso spent that final night before the Nigerian army arrived, writing by candlelight, filling his last notebook with everything he could remember, every song, every proverb, every story, every name. He wrote until his hand cramped, until the candle burned low, until the eastern sky began to lighten. He buried his notebooks beneath a metal box beneath the ukwa tree, marking the spot with a stone carved with the Nsibidi symbol for memory. Then he sat with the elders and waited for the dawn, for the soldiers, for whatever came next. Because the fight for identity, he understood now, wasn't just fought with weapons or words. It was fought with presence, with the simple, stubborn act of remaining, of saying, even in silence, "I am here, I am Igbo, you cannot erase me." As the sun rose on that uncertain morning, 3 young people faced their separate fates in the war-torn land. Adanna in the trenches, rifle ready. Obi beside her, iron-willed and iron-weary. Chinonso in the village square, armed only with his memory and his refusal to flee. Each had chosen their path. Each believed they fought for Igbo identity, for survival, for something worth preserving. But the war, indifferent to their choices, ground forward with its own terrible logic, and the question hung in the air unanswered. When the fighting ends, if it ends, who will be left to remember who they were fighting to be? Egbe bere, ugu bere, nkesi benya ebena, nku kwanya. Let the kite perch, let the eagle perch, whichever says the other should not, may its wings break.
I need to tell you what I saw happen to my people. Because if I don't, who will remember the truth? My name is Obioma, and I was 12 years old when the war ended. Old enough to understand what we'd lost, young enough to still believe we might survive it. I remember the morning the Nigerian soldiers came to Nkwo. We'd been sitting in the village square all night, waiting. My grandfather Nwokolo sat in front with the other elders, his back straight, even though I knew his bones ached. Behind him, my mother held my baby sister, whose belly was swollen from hunger, not food. I sat next to Chinonso, the teacher who'd been writing everything down in notebooks he'd buried under the big ukwa tree. He'd made me help him dig the hole at night, made me swear I'd never tell where they were hidden. When the trucks came, the red dust rose up like blood in water. The soldiers were young. Some of them looked barely older than my brother who'd gone to fight and never came back. Their commander was Hausa. I could tell by the marks on his face, different from ours. He spoke our language, but it sounded wrong in his mouth, like he was chewing rocks. "Where are the Biafran soldiers?" he demanded. "Where are the weapons?" My grandfather stood up so slowly I heard his knees crack. "There are no soldiers here, no weapons, only people who chose to die on their father's land rather than die running." I held my breath. The commander walked through our people, his soldiers pointing guns at us like we were dangerous. When he got to Chinonso, he stopped. "You, why are you not fighting?" Chinonso looked him straight in the eye. "I am fighting, just not with guns." The commander's hand went to his pistol. Every person in that square stopped breathing. Then my baby sister started crying, this thin, hungry wail that seemed too big for her tiny body. And something changed in the commander's face. He lowered his hand. "This war is over. The Republic of Biafra is finished. You are Nigerians again." But we weren't, not really. We were Igbo people who'd lost the war and everything else besides. I watched what came after. I watched my uncle return from Lagos with nothing, his houses taken, his business gone, holding just a paper that said 20 pounds would make up for everything he'd built. I watched grown men weep when they learned their life savings had vanished, that our money was worthless, that the country we tried to leave had taken everything we owned and called it abandoned property. They want reconciliation, my uncle said, but they take everything we had. I thought we were finished. I was 12 years old and I thought my people were done. But then I saw something I'll never forget. I saw my cousin Adana come back from the war. She'd fought as a soldier, dressed as a man, shot a gun, watched people die. The government said there were no women soldiers, so officially she didn't exist. But she was real, standing in our compound, thin as a stick, eyes like stones. When the men said women should go back to traditional roles, should marry and forget, she laughed, actually laughed. I fought for the right to choose who I would be, she said. Then she gathered the women, the ones who'd lost everything, and started a trading cooperative. The men mocked them, women playing at business. But Adana had learned logistics in the war, learned how to move goods when everything was trying to stop you. Within 3 years, their cooperative was the biggest in the district. Within 5, she was traveling to Lagos, building networks, making money nobody could take away because it lived in her mind and her hands. I watched Obi, who'd been trained to kill, go back to his father's rusted forge and start making hoes and machetes again. People came from other villages to buy. Then more people came. Within 2 years, he had apprentices. He was building instead of destroying, and he taught himself to remember how. I saw Chinonso dig up those notebooks and start teaching under the ukwa tree. Not just mathematics and English, but stories. Stories of who we were, what we survived, why we mattered. Every Friday, he gathered us children and told us about the war, about the courage, about the people who died and the ones who lived. My mother said we should forget, that remembering only brought pain. But Chinonso knelt down and told us, if we forget who we were, we cannot know who we can become. Memory is not just about the past, it is about the future. I was one of those children under the tree. I learned to read from Chinonso's salvaged books. I learned our history from his buried notebooks. I learned that my people had survived worse than this, that we knew how to fall and rise again. But I also saw the ones who couldn't rebuild in Igbo land. The land was exhausted, the opportunities gone, so they left. Not running this time, but searching. They went to Lagos with nothing, slept 6 to a room, ate once a day, saved every coin. They went to London, to America, to China. Everywhere they went, they worked harder than anyone else because they learned that nothing was given, everything was earned. And what you built in your mind, nobody could confiscate. I watched my own brother leave for Lagos with 1 bag and a borrowed shirt. 10 years later, he owned 3 shops. 20 years later, his children were doctors and engineers. He sent money back to build a school in our village, not because the government asked him to, but because that's what we do. We rise and we lift. 50 years after the war, I went to a memorial in Ngugu. I was 62 years old then, my hair gray, my children scattered across 3 continents. Adana was there, old and bent but still fierce. Obi came, his hands scarred from decades of forge work. Chinonso had died the year before, but his great-grandchildren came, carrying a tree sapling from London to plant beside the old ukwa. At the memorial, I watched a young woman step forward. She was Adana's great-niece, born in Canada, speaking Igbo with an accent, but speaking it nonetheless. She said, "This is not a monument to a defeated people. This is a monument to an undefeatable people. Because defeat is not about losing a war. Defeat is about losing yourself, and that we never did." I wept then, not from sadness, but from understanding. We lost the war for Biafra. We lost our homes, our money, our nation. We lost so much that it should have destroyed us. But here's what I learned watching my people these 50 years. Losing everything teaches you something invaluable. It teaches you that you are more than what you own, more than where you live, more than any border or government or piece of paper. It teaches you that what you carry inside, in your mind and spirit and determination, that's what defines you, and that nobody can take. Today, the Igbo are everywhere. We're 6% of Nigeria, but we dominate business, education, innovation. Our children lead in medicine and technology across the world. We're in Silicon Valley and Geneva and Guangzhou and London. We're traders and doctors and filmmakers and professors. We started with nothing after the war and built everything. People ask me, how did we do it? How did a defeated, dispossessed people rise so fast, spread so far, succeed so thoroughly? I tell them, we did it because we practiced. We practiced losing everything and surviving. We practiced starting over with empty hands. We practiced being told we didn't belong and creating belonging anyway. These are not skills you learn in business school. These are skills you learn from suffering and refusing to stay broken. We did it because of 3 words we teach every Igbo child. Ka chi for, as day breaks, we rise again. It's not just a saying, it's who we are. I'm 72 years old now. My grandchildren speak more English than Igbo, live in places I'll never see, have opportunities I couldn't imagine. But I make sure they know the story. I make sure they understand that they carry something precious, something earned through blood and tears and unbreakable will. I tell them, you are Igbo. That means when you fall, you rise. When you lose, you rebuild. When the world says no, you find another way. Not because you are special, but because your ancestors survived what should have killed them, and they taught their children to survive, and those children taught you. I tell them what Chinonso told me under the Ukwa tree when I was 12 years old, and I thought we were finished. We are defined not by what breaks us, but by what we build after breaking. That's the legacy. That's what I witnessed. A people who lost a war, but won something bigger. The knowledge that they could survive anything, build from nothing, and refuse to be erased no matter how hard the world tried. The war ended 50 years ago, but we're still rising, still building, still refusing to accept limits. And we'll keep rising generation after generation because that's what it means to be Igbo. Not that we don't fall, but that we always get back up. Not that we don't hurt, but that we don't let pain be the end of our story. Remember this when life breaks you. Remember that a whole people lost everything and chose to build anyway. Remember that resilience isn't about not falling down. It's about getting up every single time, no matter how hard the ground feels. That's not just our story. That's the story of the human spirit itself. The story that says you are more than your worst moment, stronger than your deepest wound, capable of more than you know. We are defined not by what breaks us, but by what we build after breaking.
We are the sun they couldn't stop. We fell, but we did not drop. From pain we learned to stand. From loss we build again. You can wound the body, not the soul within. We are Igbo, still we rise.